Sound check. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Good evening. My name is Wayne Shutsky, and I'm a political reporter with KJZZ. I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. The Citizens Clean Election Commission is the sponsor of this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections is the official sponsor of Arizona debates, so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. All registered voters can vote in the general election, which will be held on November 5th. The voter registration deadline is October 7th, and early voting begins on October 9th. Voters that are watching this debate live, you can submit a question at any time by emailing debates@kc-a.com, texting 408-840-8350, or by calling 480-937-1253. We may not get to all of the audience questions, but we will do our best. Tonight, we'll be hearing from candidates in Mesa's Legislative District 10. We'll kick off this evening's debate by first hearing from the candidates in the Senate by party, who will debate their opponent for approximately 1 hour. Then we'll move to a Q&A with one of our House candidates and conclude around 7:30 p.m. Only the candidates currently debating will appear with their cameras and microphones on. Candidates, you will have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements and 1 to 2 minutes for responses to voter questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between opponents, and if you feel the need to respond to another candidate's comments after they're done talking, you may do so. I may limit the time of those responses for time management. We remind the candidates and the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment, and our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so the electorate can vote informed. So first, we have our candidates running for the state Senate, where voters can select one. We have Republican Senator David Farnsworth and Democratic candidate Robert Doyle. In the House, when we move to that race, voters can vote for 2 candidates. The only candidate participating tonight is Democrat Helen Hunter. Republicans Justin Olson and Ralph Heap and Democrat Stephanie Simmons are not participating. Now we'll move to the Senate debate. The order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order by last name for their opening comments, and then we'll go in the reverse order for the closing comments. So, without further ado, Mr. Doyle, will you please start with your opening remarks?
Thank you very much to the Clean Elections for hosting this debate and this, hopefully, conversation with Mr. Farnsworth. I'm Robert Doyle. I'm the Democratic candidate for the Senate in Legislative District 10, which is pretty much East Mesa and a portion of Western Apache Junction. I'm new to this area, have lived here for about 3 years after living 20 years in the southwest part of Mesa. I've been a resident of Arizona for over 55 years, so I've grown up here, been educated here, and I come out of small business. So I will approach things as a small business owner who's had to essentially survive on my good decisions about fiscal management.
All right, thank you very much. And Senator Farnsworth, your opening statement, please.
Thank you. I'm going to jump right into policy. I have a hero mentor. His name is Dr. Russell M. Nelson. He's a renowned heart surgeon, and today happens to be his 100th birthday. And since today is such a special day for my mentor, I wanted to quote from some of his remarks from the past. He said, "In the first 200 years as a nation, the lives of over 1 million Americans were lost due to war. These figures are dwarfed by the toll of the new war that annually claims more casualties than the total number of fatalities from all the wars of this nation. It is a war on the defenseless and the voiceless. It is a war on the unborn. This war, labeled abortion, is of epidemic proportion and is waged globally. In the United States of America, about 25 to 30% of all pregnancies now end in abortion. Yet society professes reverence for human life. We weep for those who die, pray and work for those whose lives are in jeopardy. What sense of inconsistency can allow people to grieve for their dead, yet be callous to this baleful war being waged on life at the time of its silent development? What
Mr. Farnsworth,
encourage this?
Yeah, I let you go a little over there, but we will have more questions on that topic if you want to go deeper into that. But first off, Yeah, you're welcome. The first question I want to get to with both of you is an existential question for Arizona residents, and that has to do with water. Arizona's water supply from the Colorado River has been severely curtailed due to ongoing drought. Where and how do you think the state could find more water supply, or augment its existing water supply, or conserve its existing water supply? And we'll start with you, Senator Farnsworth.
Thank you. Water is a very critical issue. I believe there's good minds in the state that are discussing it and will come up with solutions. I don't consider myself an expert on water. I value it greatly since I've lived in Arizona my whole life and know that it's a precious commodity. I am very open-minded to all kinds of solutions, including desalination from the Gulf of California, and there's brackish water. We've talked about importing water from other states. I think that's impractical because of the cost. But I would just say I'm an optimist, and that this is a very critical issue that I believe we can find a solution for if we're open-minded and cooperate together.
Thank you. And then same question to you, Mr. Doyle.
Well, I agree with Mr. Farnsworth that it's an incredibly complex subject, given the overlapping jurisdictions, given the effect of the amount of water upon growth in Arizona, which has always been strong. Conservation is the most direct thing we can do. It's the least expensive thing we can do. We are contending with other states for the Colorado River water. It's a finite resource unless we get a series of big storms through here. But we're going to be running up into a variable that is water that will constrain growth and have multiple effects through our society. We're in a desert, and we have a very steady growth rate in this state for the past 80 years.
Thank you. Following up on both of your answers there, one idea that's been floated at the Capitol has not passed into law is ideas to more tightly regulate rural groundwater usage. I want to know what your thoughts are on those proposals and whether you could support something like that in the future. We'll go back to you, Mr. Doyle.
Well, as a person who comes out of a business background, I like to distinguish between regulation and management, because these are multiple agency, multiple jurisdictions decisions. And to just say the legislature should regulate it from the top doesn't approach the complexity of the issue. Should it be properly managed? Should the agencies that interface with other agencies in other jurisdictions be properly funded? I would look to leadership in the management of water resources from the legislature, as opposed to making decrees, unless it becomes a dire situation.
Thank you. And same question to you, Senator Farnsworth. Do you believe the legislature needs to do more to regulate rural groundwater?
In certain circumstances, it is appropriate. For instance, we saw in the news the fact that Saudi Arabia controlled a great amount of rural land. They were raising alfalfa, which we know consumes a great amount of water. And I believe that that was approached with a bipartisan effort. The governor was involved. And that's the type of thing where someone from a foreign country is taking advantage of Arizona water and shipping the alfalfa back to Saudi Arabia. It takes a careful balance. And yes, there are a lot of different people that are involved. I believe the U.S. Constitution and the Arizona Constitution explain that the proper role of government, number one, is to protect the liberty of the people. And so we have to be very, very cautious about any restrictions we put. And so I think it would be few and far between. It needs to be very carefully thought out, but there are occasions like that where there's abuse going on that it needs to be taken care of.
All right, thank you. I want to switch gears now to some questions about other issues that are top of mind for Arizona voters right now. One of them is the cost of housing. Housing prices have increased considerably in our state, which used to be known for its affordability. And I want to know either what your plan is for addressing housing affordability, or ideas you've heard at the legislature that you could support next session. Senator Farnsworth, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Great subject, cost of housing. And I'll mention I have 7 children and 32 grandchildren, 4 great-grandchildren. They all need houses, and houses, or we know, have been more expensive than either Mr. Doyle or I have seen in our lifetimes. I participated for the last 2 years in trying to find a solution. I did not personally sponsor the bill, but we had numerous bills, and I was excited to be part of a press conference, a bipartisan press conference, more than one, discussing this issue. We didn't make as much progress as I thought we should. We got one bill through that I think will move us in the right direction. But yes, this is an area we must push hard on. And in my opinion, the biggest challenge we have, Mr. Doyle talked about different jurisdictions. And yes, we have a lot of cities who each have their own plans and regulations. And the folks who have built houses in the past say that they used to be able to put one up in 6 months or a year, and now it takes more like 4 to 6 years, and it's basically because of what I would state as over-regulation. So we're going to have some hard discussions with the cities and find that balance of regulation that will protect the health and safety of families without over-regulation that tends to, they want to have everything look the same, and got to find that proper balance, because we need affordable housing. It's causing homelessness, among other things.
Thank you. And same question to you, Mr. Doyle. What solutions do you see for the housing affordability issue?
Well, I think, number one, it has to be a bipartisan issue. I mean, we all want people to be housed, and we want people who want to live in their own home to have that possibility, or even if they can't afford a home, to be able to afford the rents. And there's even a tightness for most people's budgets on that basis. Again, the solution when there's a shortage is you increase the supply to control the prices, increase the inventory of what's available. However, houses are slow to put up, and as Mr. Farnsworth pointed out, there is overlapping jurisdictions, conflicting rules. If that can be made more uniformly, developers could work with a better timeline. We do need lower cost housing and even support on the rent sides of increasing lower cost rental properties. We are facing the issue that a lot of the homeless growth is coming out of the 65 and over who can't afford a home anymore. That's a major concern. I know that some steps have been taken, and perhaps more need to be taken within the context of what monies there are within the state to do that. It's a complex problem again, but I think it, in a way, is number one for the state.
Thank you. And you both mentioned the homelessness issue that has become exacerbated as the affordability issue has grown worse. So can you talk a little bit about any ideas, any solutions you have to either provide support for those experiencing homelessness, to address that issue? And I'll go back to you, Mr. Doyle.
I used to own a building on the west side of Phoenix for about 20 years where my business was housed, and I would deal directly with the homeless, that is, living on my property, living in the neighborhood. So I saw it firsthand. I grew up in a house that both my parents were in social services. So I saw that side of it, of attempting to deal with this problem. It's a difficult problem since so much of it is related to mental health and then to substance abuse, which is difficult to fix. I think that one of the things that is within reach is to have the subsidized housing conversion of old apartment complexes or structures, hotels, into homes for these people. How that would be managed, I don't know. Whether you'd use a nonprofit entity to do that, or whether the governments would do that, I couldn't say. All I can say is I know that I've watched it personally for 50 plus years, and I dealt with it personally for 20 plus years, and it is a difficult problem to deal with. And I hesitate to just throw money at it, but it will take investments at, I think, the local level.
Thank you. Senator Farnsworth, same question to you.
Thank you. And I'd like to start by saying, as Robert said earlier, we need to increase the supply. And we agree on that. Exactly how we get there, we may not totally agree on, but we've got to increase the supply, which brings the cost down. Obviously, that's not the only solution. One of the things I've been concerned with that causes homelessness, and I have reached out and tried to talk to homeless people. I had conversations with them early on. One who came by my home and wanted some work. I gave him work. We got pretty well acquainted. And he told me that he didn't have a home, but he still had his vehicle, and he was living in his vehicle. But he told me he was going to lose his vehicle in about 6 weeks. And I asked him why, and he says, well, I got one of those predatory loans from one of the title companies, and as you know, they charge over 300% annually, Title Max and others. And I said, well, Kim, how much are your payments? How much do you owe? And he laid it out. I got out my calculator and calculated it out that all he needed to save was $15 a day, and he could pay off his car. And so I said, I'll give you enough work to do it. The next day when he came to work, I said, well, Kim, did you save out your $15? He says, oh, no, I didn't. I said, Kim, would you mind if I hold it back for you? Long story short, I did. I went with him to the loan company, and together we paid off his house. And that kept him from being homeless, at least for a time. The reason I bring that up is that's just one of the segments toward homelessness, especially here in Arizona. Where I live, there are no buses. All the buses stop at Power Road, and I'm 4 miles east of that. And of course, we have 100,000 people down in Santan Valley, a lot of people who have no access to bus. So if you want to work, you better get a job within walking distance or have a car. Some of the things that stand in the way of keeping your car are the high insurance rates. And I think that's something we need to look at, because it's just insane, the increases we've had recently. My own homeowner's insurance doubled in a year's time. The abandoned vehicle fee is way too high. When a person is driving to work and their car breaks down, they can't get it towed in time, it's picked up, and all of a sudden they have a $600 fine to pay before they can register another vehicle. And I know my time is up.
Senator Farnsworth, yeah, we got to move to the next question, but thank you for that. Sticking on kind of Arizonans' checkbooks. Taxes are a primary concern for voters, according to a survey by Clean Elections. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on Arizona's current tax code and whether there are any things that need to be changed about that, and if so, what? And I'll stick with you, Senator Farnsworth.
Well, I'm of the philosophy that if the taxes are low, then businesses will come to Arizona and prosper and hire more people, and the economy will boom. And that's what I believe we're seeing in Arizona now. We have worked on this tax code for years, and I believe we're in a good place. I don't think it's perfect, but I would be inclined to lower tax before I raised it, because I'm of the philosophy that if you have a reasonable, fair tax, then the economy expands and you end up collecting more. And so there's more money available for the many needs we have, especially transportation, which I hope we will discuss before the end.
Yes, we will get to transportation. Mr. Doyle, same question to you. What are your thoughts on the state's tax code?
Well, number one, I don't have direct experience in setting that policy. So that's something I'd want to look at very closely with good consultants to help me guide me through it. Our income tax rates are below the national average by a good 30%, and corporate rates are about half of the national average. Just to put it into context of, I'm not saying the national average is correct, but that puts into context of other states. Our sales tax is about 50% higher than the national average, the tax burden of that. So it becomes a very regressive tax structure because sales tax hits the lower income people the hardest. As much as I wouldn't want to be facing higher taxes for my income bracket, of course, that would be, I'd have to say, let's look at upper income earners, such as myself, and make sure that we are paying a fair share of tax, even if it makes the tax curve a little bit on the progressive side. On the other hand, I do agree that lower taxation is more attractive to people moving in, to businesses moving in. I spend a lot of time in California, and I've dealt with California income tax, and I'm not certain how people do it over there. It's a beautiful state, but expensive to be in. Mm-hmm. It's a cautionary tale for us.
Thank you. And now moving, Mr. Senator Farnsworth, you'd like to respond?
Yeah, just a quick response. I just wanted to comment that the higher bracket folks tend to be business owners, and I would just suggest if we tax them more, they will most likely pass it on to their customers, which hurts all of us. So just wanted to add that little opinion in there.
Okay. Thank you. And Mr. Doyle, would you like to respond?
Yeah, definitely, as a business owner, I would love to pass on expenses, but sometimes the marketplace, particularly that I work in, does not allow for any control over my pricing. So it's something I would have to absorb. And I think, as much as I hate to say I would like to have a higher tax bill, I feel in a way it's part of my responsibility to the general society, as much as I would complain writing a bigger check. I would whine about it, but I could see it in a bigger context as well.
All right. Well, moving on to the next topic that Senator Farnsworth hinted at with transportation and talking about what some of those tax dollars pay for. I'm wondering what infrastructure projects, whether in your district or affecting your district, would you advocate for down at the Capitol? You'll be one of 30 voices who has a vote from the Senate side on the budget. Where would you like to see some of that money go in terms of infrastructure, transportation, or otherwise? And I'll go back to you, Mr. Doyle.
That is a frustrating question to answer. Somebody who's lived here for a long time and just known I can't get by without a car, and I can't get by the freeways that have come in since I moved here, or even when I moved here, there were 3 bridges over the Salt River. Now there's this nice, the I-10 ended way out someplace just barely outside of California. And you get used to the ease of a car and the convenience of a car, especially since I sometimes work far from where I live. And I've tried to take the bus, and it's proven to be a very exhausting system. But I would agree that buses are probably the quickest fix, even though ridership can be low. I do think we need to face the reality that we are a car culture, and we're going to need to expand roads into the Southeast Valley and Santan, Queen Creek, and also west as well, because I-10 going west is jammed. Even going into the city in the middle of the day, it's jammed. We're behind on a lot of roads throughout the state. That's not the best decision, but I think it's, in the short run, the most practical. Yes, buses, as Mr. Farnsworth pointed out, are severely lacking out here in the east side of the valley. Is the density of population to make it economically viable? I don't know at this point.
Thank you. And same question to you, Mr. Farnsworth. Where would you like to see those infrastructure dollars go?
Oh, man, I wish we had an hour to talk about this alone. I am the chairman of Senate Transportation Technology and Missing Children Committee. Transportation, I believe, is the number one, well, let me not say it that way. Transportation is a very legitimate part of government, very important, because when we build a new highway or a new freeway, new interchange, it blesses the lives of people living now and future generations. A good freeway, and I will say that I remember when there were no freeways in Arizona, absolutely none. They built the 17, and then yes, the 10 was connected all the way across the country except through Phoenix. And I honor the people that created the Deck Park Tunnel that connected that. I remember driving down the rutted road of Buckeye trying to get to California. There was no way without going through those potholes. But specifically to your question, Wayne, State Route 24, I believe, is a very important piece of infrastructure. And I founded a committee about 8 years ago called the East Valley Transportation Infrastructure Committee. We have met regularly for 8 years discussing how we can improve the situation. And one of the things we discussed was the interchange at Ellsworth and 24. And the plan that was presented by ADOT, who, by the way, I meet with every Thursday. I meet with ADOT every Thursday, DCS every Thursday, DES every Thursday, and the budget folks every Thursday. Anyway, the work goes on when we adjourn. It doesn't ever stop. But we talked about the 24 interchange, and they were going to build half a bridge and have 2 lanes of traffic on that half of a bridge. And I said, what would it cost to, why are we building one that will be obsolete in the beginning? And so we negotiated and got participation between Maricopa County, Pinal County, City of Mesa, and Queen Creek, and the state of Arizona. And we completed that interchange with a full-blown interchange that will not be obsolete when it's built. And we're trying to do the same thing with 24 in Ellsworth. That's where I encouraged the budget to go last year and this year.
Sorry, I'll have to cut you off there. I know there's a lot more to talk about on infrastructure, but we'll have to keep it there. All right, we're going to move on to another topic, another hot button issue that the legislature has a lot of control over, and that is elections in Arizona and the way they're run. I'm going to start the discussion off with a yes or no question, simple or not so simple, depending on how you view it. But I'd like you to stick to that yes or no, and then we'll get into some follow-ups. So the question is, do you agree that President Joe Biden won the 2020 presidential election in Arizona, Mr. Doyle?
Oh, I do. Yes.
And Mr. Farnsworth.
I do not.
And so, if not, how do you explain that every single case that's gone trying to prove widespread fraud has not resulted in evidence that such fraud tainted the results of that election?
I believe two possibilities. One is corruption. I believe we have a problem in our court system. We have some judges and some attorneys who are corrupt, as in our society, in every area of society, there is some corruption.
Do you have any evidence of that corruption?
I do not have the evidence. And the other thing I was going to mention is I think they were looking in the wrong place. In my opinion, it goes back to 2020 and the hanging Chad in Florida. I predicted in 2020 that by putting the elections on computer, it was opening it up to fraud. And I believe the fraud came through the airwaves, even though they claim it was not connected to the internet. I've heard all those claims. I grew up in Arizona. I was at the rallies. I've talked to people in our district, and I just am confident within myself because of my life experience. I had an expectation of how the election was going to come out. It came out differently. And even though I do not have proof, I'm answering your question honestly. I believe there was fraud in that election, which turned from one solution to the other, from one result to the other.
I appreciate you answering the question. I have to point out that Arizona, we do vote on paper ballots, and the sample audits that every county is required to do had shown that those elections were accurate. But I do want to move on to questions that the legislature can control about how our elections are conducted. So Arizona has been at the forefront of voting by mail for decades. Do you support voting by mail as it exists today? And if not, what reforms would you like to enact? And I'll go back to you, Senator Farnsworth.
I am concerned about voting by mail. I vote by mail myself. It's very convenient. The majority of Arizona votes by mail. I have the old-fashioned idea that we ought to go back the way it used to be, primarily walking into your own precinct where your neighbors know you, present your identification. That's just a double cover, because for years and years I walked into my precinct and they all knew me. And that is, so 2 levels of security there. Again, it has to be, any changes have to be done very carefully, and people in our district want us to throw out everything and just go back to precinct voting. And that would be very, very hard to do. I think we ought to move in that direction. But it should be a bipartisan effort, because people who want honest elections are not only concerned about the result, but the confidence that people have in those elections. And, you know, I could be wrong about what I believe. Nevertheless, I know one thing for a fact, and that is there are millions of people across this country who feel like I do, that feel that the election was not honest. And so I think it should be a bipartisan effort to tighten things up, so that if for no other reason, even though, as Mr. Doyle feels like it was a good result, I feel like it was a bad result, but working together, we should be able to make some changes that will inspire people with more confidence. And it's not easy, it is complex. We will be talking about this for years on how to regain that confidence that has been lost.
Thank you. And same question to you, Mr. Doyle. Do you support the vote by mail system we have today? And what, if any, reforms would you like to see?
I do support the vote by mail system because of its convenience and hopefully better voter turnout, which is in general not the best. I've had the benefit of hearing from Adrian Fontes when he was Maricopa County Recorder about the system that he worked with the Maricopa Board of Supervisors to take away these opportunities for hacking a system by keeping certain parts of the computer system offline and transferring data very carefully by hand from one place to the other. Whether that was followed in reality, all I can say is what I was told. Certainly, anything where you're dealing with millions of pieces of data, that is people's names, have they moved, so forth and so on, requires a constant expense of going through and checking and checking and checking. But that's our new world. I think that vote by precinct, which is how I did, and I diligently voted every single time, is going to be harder on older populations or people without transportation, people who work perhaps far away from where they live. It is a complex issue. I mean, the Maricopa County returns were audited by an outside team, came in with pretty much the same results as the county recorder. In terms of the final result, I was surprised that Joe Biden won, but he was only approximately 1.5 points behind in the polling before that. So it wasn't out of line statistically, but it was a surprise to me. So I don't see it jumping 5 or 6 points, but it was within the error rate for that amount. Certainly, any system can be tightened up, improved, and defended from hacking.
Thank you. Mr. Farnsworth, you'd like to respond?
Yeah, just one comment. I see that Mr. Doyle and I agree on one thing. We were both surprised when Joe Biden won.
Well, you can agree on that. So glad we found some bipartisan agreement there. We're going to move off of elections for now, maybe come back to it if we have some time, but so many topics to talk about today. Another topic that you talked about in your opening statement, Mr. Farnsworth, is abortion and abortion access in Arizona. We currently have an initiative on the ballot that would legalize abortion up until the point of what is considered viability, similar to what was legal under Roe v. Wade, and beyond that for certain medical conditions for the mother. I want to know if you support that initiative, and if not, do you support the current 15-week law that is in place? And I'll go to you first, Mr. Farnsworth, and remember you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Got my timer ready to go this time. That is a very passionate issue to me, as you can tell, because I used my opening minute to talk about it. I am very much opposed to Proposition 139. The biggest reason is it goes too far. From my reading of it, it allows abortion right up to the time of birth, which I think that most people in Arizona disagree with. Now, the concern is a lot of people profess that it does not go that far, and so we could get in the weeds and read about it, which we don't have time to do. But I clearly am very opposed to it. In fact, I have made that my number one priority of defeating 139. More important than my own reelection is defeating that, because it puts it in the Constitution, and those who understand how the laws in Arizona work, once you change the Arizona Constitution, the legislature does not have power over that. And in all the changes to the Constitution I've seen, I'm not aware of one that's ever been reversed. There may be one I'm not aware of, but the bottom line is if 139 passes, it allows abortion, from my reading, up to the point of birth with no exception, no conditions that I can see that I have faith in. And so I am adamantly opposed to 139.
Thank you, Senator Farnsworth. And then same question to you, Mr. Doyle. What is your position on the abortion access initiative that is currently on the ballot?
Well, I have to say that I have not read it from a legal standpoint of what it does allow and not allow. I would agree that abortion up to the time of birth is not a good public policy and not a good moral policy. So I would disagree with that. The standard that I would go back to is a short period of time, 15 weeks, 20 weeks, whatever, within that time frame. I see up until that point that at that point, the blastocyst is still part of the mother's body. It's not a separate human entity. I know it's all rather vague, but I believe it's an individual right. It's also a health right. It impinges upon the privacy of women, and that's why they're so passionate about it. It's not even the fact that they may ever want to do it, but they just don't like government control over their body and their health decisions. To go to the point of birth, absolutely not. Finding some middle point, early point, then I would say yes.
Thank you. And I want to stick on.
Wayne,
yes, Senator Farnsworth.
may I respond just briefly there? And
Yes.
And I appreciate what Mr. Doyle said, and I think it is critical that everybody read the language, because I believe that is the issue at hand, that it goes too far. I think most people would agree with what Mr. Doyle just said. If, in fact, it allows abortion up to the time of birth, which I believe it does, then I believe Arizonans, with that understanding, would reject it, again, because it's so permanent. And my last comment and response is, I have 6 daughters, I have 13 granddaughters, and 2 great-granddaughters. And to my knowledge, all of them are very pro-life and believe in the sanctity of life. So I know some women are on the other side, but most of the ones I know of are solidly pro-life.
And I know it's a very contentious issue, and I would encourage anyone watching now to go read the language and obviously make a decision for yourself based on that language. I'm going to move on to another healthcare question. Survey respondents in a poll conducted by Clean Elections regularly cite prescription drug prices as a major concern for households. I'm wondering what state actions could the legislature take to help alleviate those costs? I know the governor had proposed some ideas in her State of the State last year. So I will go first to you, Mr. Doyle. Does the state have a role in prescription drug prices?
That's a question, because I've always assumed that was more of a federal question. But I suppose since insurance is regulated at the state, of course, where do you say that we step in? And I'm not in favor of necessarily regulating a marketplace, but I'm fully aware that if you don't have very good insurance, you're in big trouble, especially for people who need the insulin. If the federal government is making some good decisions, then we should be able to live under that umbrella. If not, then the legislature, the state needs to step forward and say, our people can't afford these things, these life-giving medications. And whether it is based on income or it's across the board, I don't have the background in that question at this moment.
Thank you. Senator Farnsworth, same question to you about what, if anything, the state can do about prescription drug prices.
Thank you. Let me set my timer so I won't run over. I think the state can do a lot, but in my opinion, it's more in the area of investigating the facts, digging into things so we understand the reality, because I believe that at the root of the problem are the influence of lobbyists, both in Phoenix and in Washington, all across the nation. Lobbyists are paid to protect corporations like the drug companies, and I believe they have too much influence. Now, there's no simple solution, because you can't outlaw lobbyists, but if you shine the light on it, and the most important thing, Wayne, is we need to have journalists who are willing to share the truth when it is discovered. I believe that the government agencies, particularly in the federal government, but also in the state, they tend to make agreements with different companies. And I don't know exactly how to explain that, except there is corruption out there, good old boy deals made so that when a company wants to be legalized, they come in all the time to the state legislature and lobby us for laws. And they call it consumer protection when in reality, what it is turf protection. They want to make it very difficult for a small drug company, for instance, to get started, for someone to come up with a new drug. They want to pass a law that makes it more difficult. And I see I'm about out of time. And so we need to investigate, find out the truth, share the truth, and then clean up these inappropriate agreements that are out there that caused everything to go up in price.
Thank you. I want to move on to education. Obviously, another topic at front of mind for many voters. Arizona's Empowerment Scholarship Account program allows students to use taxpayer money to attend private school or homeschool. And lawmakers had recently expanded that program. I'm wondering, Senator Farnsworth, do you support the extension of ESAs to all students? And if so, how do you respond to the majority of voters who had voted down a similar expansion when it was on the ballot several years ago? I'll start with you, Senator Farnsworth.
And thank you. And again, I wish we had an hour to talk about this subject. I think the key frustration is whenever we, as a legislature, and I have been in and out of the legislature for 30 years, so I've had some experience in that area. Every time we vote to give more money to education, it does not get to the teachers sufficiently. And I've used the comparison, if you take an old soda pop bottle, when I was a kid, didn't have a whole lot of money, so we'd mix up Kool-Aid and clean out the soda pop bottle and refill it. And in order to do it, you needed a funnel. Well, I used the example of when we're trying to get money to the teachers, it's like taking a funnel but turning it upside down and trying to pour the money into the small end. And what happens to the money, in my opinion, is it goes to supervision. We have superintendents out there that are being paid too much, and there are too many superintendents, and it's like a sponge between the money and the teachers. We can't get it to the teachers. And so that's caused frustration over the years because teachers need more money. They're bailing out and going to other states, but it's not because the legislature has not been responsive. When Red for Ed had their movement, we gave them more than they were asking for, but it did not get to the teachers. And I encourage everybody to look at the different districts and look at where the money is. And when the money goes in, how much gets to the teachers. And in my last 19 seconds, I'll say I do support school choice. When I was in the legislature back in the 90s, we fought for it back then. I was thrilled when it passed, simply for one reason. I believe when there's more competition, it raises all boats. Education will be improved in Arizona if parents have a choice, because they vote with their feet, and that makes everybody more concerned about education. There's nothing more important than educating our young people. Thank
you, Senator. Same question to you, Mr. Doyle. Do you think the ESA program should have been expanded universally? Many Democrats who are at the legislature now have said they want to either at least partially repeal that.
I have a lot of problems with the ESA for a couple reasons. One is, just last week I was driving by and saw a karate school that had a huge banner that said ESA vendor. A couple of weeks before that, I drove by a church that said pretty much the same thing. And I'm very adamant about the separation of church and state, or about tax dollars going directly into private enterprise. I would agree that any expenditures from the state legislature should, as much as possible, go into the salaries of these teachers, because I hear that all the time of being overworked and underpaid. But I would not be able to evaluate whether the administrative costs are too high, or whether somebody who's running a very, very large district is worth their figures unless I compared it to other things. Arizona has been always at the bottom of public funding, 48th, 49th. And I'm not against school choice. I went to both public schools and parochial schools. I know the strengths and the weaknesses of both systems, but I'm reluctant to turn over a large part of what I believe should be a publicly managed system over to private enterprise. And ultimately in private enterprise, your focus is on profits. Whether we want to accept it or not, that does make one a good capitalist. So I would be against the voucher system unequivocally.
Thank you. And we have time for one more question before we'll get to our closing statements. And I want to stick on a school-related topic. We recently had another tragic school shooting in Georgia. And so I want to know what you believe the legislature's role is, what the legislature should do to prevent something similar from happening here in Arizona. And I'll go back to you first, Mr. Doyle.
It is heartbreaking whenever we see these mass killings across this country. And again, it's a complex subject because it involves managing distribution of guns and mental health issues, emotional health issues. I know that there's been efforts in the legislature to address the mental health of young people. It just seems to defy easy solutions because it's so easy to get a gun, even with parental approval. And it's in the culture of the country. And unfortunately, the internet has created this language, this culture of violent expressions that seems impossible to control, though. And after that shooting in Georgia, there was many young people online who got into trouble for faking news about a school is going to be attacked or expressing more violence. It goes to our culture, unfortunately. I think the legislature can tighten up how guns are distributed and sold. And of course, mental health is so difficult to solve, but anything that can be done from the legislature should address the mental health of young people.
Thank you. Senator Farnsworth, we'll go to you. How can the legislature respond to gun violence and preventing a violent situation in Arizona like we saw in Georgia?
We are in an awful situation. And I just turned 73 years old a couple of months ago, and I have seen a lot of differences in my life. It used to be, and I'll refer to what Mr. Doyle said about mental health. That is a real challenge. I believe part of the reason we have so much mental health in our country is the fact that our society is collapsing. When I was young, growing up in Mesa, Arizona, where I live now, we trusted the police, we trusted the schools. Society was supportive of the family. You could walk down the street and, I'd leave during the summertime. I might leave early in the morning, walk down to the Rendezvous Park and spend all day and not show up until after dark. My parents didn't worry about me. Our society supported families. They supported belief in God. Our society is collapsing. Our families are collapsing. We need to pray for God's help, primarily because government is not going to be able to fix this. I am a strong believer in the Second Amendment. I don't think we should restrict the ownership of guns, although I realize in circumstances of mental illness and things like that, we need to take a good, hard, careful look at that. But we are not going to be able to fix this problem until we close that border. This is part of the thing that is making people crazy, is the fact, knowing we have no security. People are flooding in, they're bringing drugs, and a lot of the problems are caused by the fentanyl and the drugs that are coming in, flooding into our state. And so government is not going to be able to fix this. First of all, we need to close the border so we can keep those drugs out and get back to belief in God.
Thank you, Senator. That is all the time we have for questions. So now we will move to our closing statements. You each have 1 minute, and we will start with you, Senator Farnsworth.
Well, I'm just going to ad-lib this and say that we have a real challenge, and I want to say to Mr. Doyle, if I prevail in the race, I would welcome you to work with me to continue our discussion and see if we can solve these problems. If you prevail in the race, I would appreciate an invitation to share some of the experiences I've had. As I mentioned, I'm meeting with different agencies every week, lots of hours. I have spent hundreds of hours studying the budget. I have these statute books behind me that sometimes I wake up early in the morning and I'll spend 3, 4, 5 hours reading statute and trying to decipher the good from the bad, because as I mentioned, a big challenge we have is lobbyists coming in and promoting bad laws that protect them and not the citizens. And I see I'm out of time, so I appreciate you having me on tonight.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Doyle, your closing statement, please.
Well, firstly, I'd like to thank Mr. Farnsworth for being here tonight, because in a lot of ways, you didn't really need to be here. So I appreciate the courtesy and the respect of him showing up. As I expressed before we went live, it's good to hear his thoughts without a media filter. No criticism to you, Wayne, but it always comes out somewhat different than what people intend. So I really appreciated the perspectives. Want to thank him for his long years of services. I would definitely love to continue the conversation, whether I prevail or not. There's much I could learn from him. And but I'll just close by saying that my approach to things is very collaborative. I am a social progressive, but I am a fiscal conservative. The numbers have to make sense in the end, and they need hard analysis, because I've learned in my business, if I don't do that, I get a very expensive education in what not to do again. So that's how I would approach being a legislator, is to look at the analysis very, very hard.
Thank you. Well, that concludes our Senate portion of the debate. Thank you to both of our candidates for participating. We appreciate it, and we know the voters appreciate it as well. We will now transition to the House candidates in just a moment, so please stick with us.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to our Legislative 10 debate. I am here for a Q&A session with Democrat Helen Hunter, who is running for one of the district's 2 seats in the Arizona House. The other candidates, Republicans Justin Olson and Ralph Heap, and Democrat Stephanie Simmons, were not participating in this forum. So without further ado, Ms. Hunter, I want to give you 1 minute for an opening remark.
Thank you so much for having me. I am here for the Arizona House of Representatives in LD10 for the third time because I believe going forward that the voters in my district deserve to have a choice in a candidate who reflects their values and also believes in honest, responsible government. My focus would be, when elected, women's health and reproductive rights, public school funding, a growing economy, which includes affordable housing, water resource management and analysis, and of course, comprehensive border control. And lastly, anything that would come into me that I need to address for constituents in my district. I'm thankful to be part of this, have the opportunity to be a part of this, no longer a debate, but it's a Q&A. So thank you so much again. And I'm ready to go. I'm happy to participate as a clean elections candidate.
Thank you. And I'll remind our viewers, we'll be here for another 30 minutes with this Q&A, and any voters who are watching live can submit a question at any time by emailing debates@kc-a.com, texting 408-840-8350, or by calling 480-937-1253. And we'll move to our questions. So I think I know your position on the abortion access initiative that's on the ballot based on your opening statement, but I'm wondering if you can explain your position on that initiative and why you prefer it to the 15-week limit that is currently in state law.
Well, I'm a board certified chaplain, so I'm in hospitals a lot and do a lot with women's health. And as a woman, a mother, grandma, mom, grandma, I think the 15-week abortion limit is adequate in some situations, but because of the complexity of pregnancy, all the different issues, it's mental, it's emotional, it's physical, it's biological, all the issues that come together, elements that come together for pregnancy, that you just cannot limit that. And because it has to be between a woman and her doctor, and I have to err, or I should say, stay on the side of a woman's choice. Whatever your belief system is, we still need to look at the woman's choice. And as an African-American woman whose history is rooted in slavery, where my ancestors, female ancestors, were forced to have children by their slave owners against their will, raped and molested, I have no choice but to choose to err on the side of choice.
Thank you. And I'm going to stick on some ballot initiatives for now. You had also mentioned comprehensive border control in your opening statement. We have Proposition 314 going before voters, which was sent by Republican lawmakers. It would allow sheriffs, local law enforcement to enforce immigration law, like crossing the border illegally, and also includes some provisions to create further penalties for fentanyl distributing and using fake documents to get a job or get public benefits. I want to know your position on that, and if you have other ideas you'd like to see the legislature take to secure the border.
Well, let me say that with a few exceptions, the propositions on the ballot, I think there are 13. Out of those 13, I agree with one, and that is, I think it's 139 on the abortion proposition. I think those, the other propositions either maintain the status quo, if that issue would go down, or to change and maintain or increase the control of the legislature for their activities, and they're related to that proposition. Any activity they want to maintain, I believe their intention is to maintain control. So the border control there was a good proposition originally that was voted down by the House and the Senate that was introduced. It was bipartisan, and so for some reason our counterparts did not vote that in. So there were some great things in that proposition, that legislation, but it was voted down. It provided for.
Continue. Yeah, I was going to say, what areas of that do you support?
Well, I think it had more it had provided for more security, more personnel, and more technology, and it was not used. So I would still, if that particular legislation remained like it was originally, I would be supportive of that.
Okay, are you speaking of the congressional action that I believe President Trump had some role in torpedoing? Okay. Um, the next question I wanted to move on to, I had talked with your counterparts in the Senate race, is water. It's obviously a huge issue for all Arizonans and for our future as a state. So, with Arizona's water supply from the Colorado River being curtailed, where do you think the state could either find more water, or how could we conserve the water we have?
Well, I need to be honest with that water issue. I recognize that it is a huge issue. It is not an issue I completely have my arms around. I understand there's a lot of technical difficulties. You have the
Sure.
ground and the surface water and the ownership and who has the rights to it and the different types, the ways they're managed. So I would have to have a lot more background information, a lot of more expertise to assist me and really have fleshing out those issues and making some suggestions or introducing legislation that would address them in an appropriate manner.
Okay. Well, more on pulling the issue back a little bit, talking about augmentation, adding more water from other sources wherever they might be, or conservation. Do you have a preference for one or the other as where the legislature should focus its resources? A combination of the two?
Well, I definitely think conservation is huge, and there's several ways that we can look at that. Conservation is something everyone can participate in. It does not require a lot of regulation. We can do that personally in our homes and with our families, and we actually exercise that ourselves. Even flushing your toilets and your dishwashers and your washing your clothes. There are a lot of things that we can do personally to help uh, mitigate the water shortage. I think the conservation things that have been introduced, watering the grass. But that's been happening for the last couple of years, cutting back on watering the grass, and as well as introducing the artificial turf, which we have and we love, less work and less money. So I think that on the microscopic level, I think that's one of the best things we can do because there has to be political will for anything that's introduced. You have to want to see this something improved, and you will have to be to do it, to do something about it yourself.
Thank you. I want to move on to another top of mind issue for Arizonans, which is housing affordability. As housing and rental costs have kind of exploded here in Arizona and made it a lot more difficult for Arizonans to afford a place to live, what ideas do you have that the legislature could do to improve housing affordability?
You know, I hate to use the word tax because it's kind of a dirty word nowadays, but I think that we need a little bit more of equity in the tax structure in Arizona, to where and I think even the Senate candidates, I think even Farnsworth mentioned that the ones with the higher incomes should be willing and should bear a little of the burden of those that don't have such high incomes. So I think there can be some movement in the tax structure to provide for housing. I use the example of our dogs. We have shelters for dogs. We have provisions for our animals on the street, but we do not have provisions for people. And I believe if it was approached in a respectable way to ask those and to just to share, even in the sales tax as well. The sales taxes uh, uh, affect the lower income folks a lot more. But the percentages, they affect the poor, the lower economic basis. So I think there's going to have to be some tweaking of the taxes, not to just to alienate the higher income folks, but I think they should be willing to do their fair share.
All right, I'm gonna go to another question that I followed up with your counterparts in the Senate on that. Then, if we are raising more taxes, I mean, you've obviously mentioned housing is one avenue. Are there any other infrastructure or other type projects you'd like to see those tax dollars go towards that you think would either benefit the folks of your district or Arizonans as a whole?
Well, to me, homelessness has become a part of the infrastructure. So I think that's one of the things that we need to address. We have homeowners complaining and they're under the bridges and everything. So they are part of the infrastructure. I do think, and I haven't looked at this recently, But the last session, I believe that we had a budget surplus in the state budget.
This year we had quite a significant shortfall, but yes, the previous year the surplus was quite large.
That could have been used, to help provide housing and shelter for those who are unfortunate. What can we say to that? I think the streets, the improvement. I've been here 20 years, almost 20 years. I see great improvements in the streets, the freeways, the parks and so forth that have been coming up, even in our neighborhood. But I think that we as a humanity, part of humanity, we have to look at some ways that will help the people that are less fortunate. Not even mentioning that a lot of the homeless population do have mental issues and drug issues, so we need to address those things, the root cause of homelessness, other than affordable housing.
Sure. Okay, I want to move on to election issues. The legislature obviously has a huge say in how our elections are run in this state, and it's been a very contentious issue. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but from your registration as a Democrat, I'm going to assume you believe that President Joe Biden won his election in Arizona in 2020. And
I believe it, and I think my counterparts know it.
thank you. And
fighting on the wall,
and the unproven claims of voter fraud that have come since then have led to a lot of discussions about how our elections are run. One of the topics of that discussion is vote by mail, which has been in place in Arizona for decades. Do you support the existing vote by mail system? And are there any reforms you'd like to see to that system?
Well, I think voting by mail is a part of common sense government. It's common sense. It's more convenient. It enables a larger part of the electorate to participate, especially seniors and so forth, families with children, working folks. So, we want to keep a responsive government, and we want to have the best elections possible and the best honest results possible, that the vote by mail should never be eliminated.
Thank you. And on that topic, do you believe that Arizonans should be required to show a photo ID even if they're dropping off that mail-in ballot?
I think that's ridiculous. That's just adding more burden. It's affecting more strategies to impact ballot access. And when you affect and limit ballot access, then a lot of times people believe that the election results would be more in their favor. So no, I don't think that's anything that's needed. We've already established our identity on the voting list. That's enough.
Thank you. And we talked about all the various initiatives and questions that will be on Arizona ballots this year. Some of them referred by the legislature, but some of them referred through the citizen initiative process, which is guaranteed in the Arizona Constitution. But the process has been criticized by some as being susceptible to out-of-state influence through the money that can be used to promote those initiative campaigns. I'm wondering if you think the citizen initiatives system should be further restricted in any way, or if you are happy with the way it's currently operated.
You're talking about for the ballot?
Yeah, the process to put something like the abortion question on the ballot. Are you happy with that system?
Oh, no, I don't think that the citizen initiative should be eliminated or limited, because that's what democracy is. That's part of the structure of our government, and the citizens should have a right to come to the government in the proper way with the proper I can't even think of the word I want. The proper tools that we have to be able to express their rights and their desires and their needs, and bring that to the government for
a vote at the ballot.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And all right, I want to move on to education now. We have the Arizona Empowerment Scholarship Account Program, also known as the School Voucher Program, that uses taxpayer dollars to allow students to either be homeschooled or attend a private school. It was expanded universally to all students in Arizona, and the program has grown exponentially since that point. Do you think the ESA program should have been expanded in that way? And would you vote to either eliminate it or kind of pull it back if you were elected?
I'm not sure if I would say pull it back. I think it needs to be, I have a much greater protections in that legislation that would has more accountability of how those funds are being spent. That's my, I think the voucher program has some merits. I do think it appears to be benefiting families that don't have that need for that type of assistance as much. But like as I said, I'm always choice. If a parent has a right to choose and have input in their children's education. But I do see, from what I'm seeing over the news and the reports we're looking at, that the money for the ESA voucher program is not being managed appropriately. People are taking kids for horseback riding and going to France to learn. I mean, it's excessive. And so it should be maintained, but it should be held accountable and managed responsibly.
Thank you. And sticking with education, do you believe Arizona's K-12 public education system as a whole is adequately funded? And if not, how would you propose raising additional funds for public schools?
Well, I have to say that I think the teachers, the personnel that we have in the school systems are great. I know a lot of them. The school board is trying to do a great job. The school boards, plural, are doing a great job. But I do not believe that we are providing the best education we can for all children. And until we are providing the best education for all children, there has to be some improvement, some cutbacks, some changes, and some different ways that funding is allocated. And also for the teachers. I mean, I heard even Farnsworth even said, and he is able to influence some of this. He even said that the teachers are not getting the money. Well, he needs to be doing something about that. And if I'm elected, I would be doing something about that to make sure that the teachers get the most important profession in the whole world. You're raising the next generation of people, of children. And so I would definitely be addressing teacher pay. I taught school back in Ohio. Here's foreign language, and even the foreign language and especially teaching curriculums need even more assistance. When the teachers have to start buying their own material for the classroom, that's a problem. So yes, I would do something that I'm not seeing done with the current legislature and Senate.
Thank you. And that perfectly leads into my next question, which deals with teachers and how many teachers are leaving Arizona or leaving the profession altogether. You mentioned pay. Is there anything else, any other ideas you would have to try and keep teachers in the classroom or attract a new generation of teachers to Arizona?
Well, I think money is still no money, $50,000 a year for a salary is not like it was 10, 15 years ago. Not teachers need a higher pay. They also need more support, administrative support, more assistance with the disciplinary problems that they have sometimes. They're also they're burdened with a lot of the children now. There's more homeless children coming to the schools. And some of the teachers are even trying to clothe and feed the homeless children that are there. So there's a lot more that's our most important investment is in our children. So I'd be an advocate, a strong advocate for providing extras, and including the medical care, the school nurses. I understand they're not funded as well either. So the teachers are also trying to be nurses as well. So we need to support the teachers. They deserve it and we need them.
And so how would you go about, if you're going to want to increase the pay, then the money has to come from somewhere, either through cuts or raising taxes. How would you prefer to see the legislature increase that teacher pay?
I believe that the money should be allocated differently. So if that's the taxes, then that we can hit that bucket. But we have enough to go around.
Okay.
So we've got to allocate the taxes. The taxation rate may be okay, but the way it's distributed now seems to be flawed. So I think the taxation is always going to be a part of it. That's how public activities are funded. We need to make sure that the taxes are equitable, and that's what I would work for, equitable.
Thank you. We just saw a tragic situation in Georgia a few days ago with another school shooting. I'm wondering, what role do you believe the Arizona legislature has in ensuring something like that doesn't happen here? And what can the legislature do to try and prevent something like that?
I've watched this now over the last I guess decade now since school shootings have increased. And it is the government's duty to protect the citizens. especially the vulnerable little children, babies. So I think that we need to do a lot more training. There has to be a lot more protections in place in the schools. I understand that a lot of schools have SRO officers. They need to be a little bit more visible, a little more prepared to protect the children that they're in the schools that they are monitoring. There has to be a lot of things need to start at home. A lot of these shootings we're seeing now are kids, are other students. Students are killing each other. And we're seeing that a lot of that is the last one in Kentucky. The parents are buying AK-47s and what do you RF-15s or whatever they have, assault rifles are, and they're allowing their children to use them. So it's got to start at home. Again, it's a political will. You have to not just look at what's best for yourself. You have to look at what's best for the your surrounding community and your family and your future generations. And we're not doing that.
In connected question, do you support further gun control measures to be taken by the legislature, either requiring background checks for gun purchases between individuals or red flag laws that can have a court order or some such thing to temporarily take someone's gun away if they meet certain criteria that they may be a risk?
All of the above. And
Simple.
we should do everything in our power to protect the kids in school and the teachers.
Mhm.
All those things are be enforced.
Thank you. And staying on public safety, do you believe that our police officers need more accountability to the public? And if so, what kind of ideas what do you think that looks like, I guess?
You know, I've worked with the police departments in the East Valley for years, and right now I'm actually on the Use of Force Committee with the City of Mesa Police Department, and we have some great officers and some great leaders. What we need to do is support the ones that are really doing what they should do, and then we should really hold accountable the ones that are not. And we do know, and it's hard to do that. I think Mesa has 900 police officers. I think that's the last number I heard. And even though the leadership has the right idea, the right concepts, they're doing the training, I've been watching them. You cannot legislate a person's heart. You cannot legislate compassion. You can't legislate humanity. So they have to, and they're getting a lot stricter. And I like the path they're taking, get more training, more follow up. And I think it needs to continue even on a larger scale, especially as we know Phoenix is not having a great day, a great year. With their training, compatibility, mental health, and services for the officers as well. They have issues with their own families. Sometimes they bring them to work. They need a drug addiction. They're under pressure. They're working crazy shifts. We have to take care of the people who we want to take care of us.
Thank you. So obviously, if you are a legislator, you won't have so much control over local police departments, but you will have a say in some issues that affect Department of Public Safety, DPS officers throughout the state. I believe there's a shortage of officers right now that's limited coverage, 24/7 coverage throughout the state. What can the state do to attract more DPS officers and increase retention?
That's another one that's a huge issue. And I'd have to do a lot more soul searching and a lot more research in those areas. I don't have a lot of familiarity with the DPS department. That's the state level, right?
Yeah.
See, I think I see or I'm hearing is burnout, a lot of officer burnout, a lot of work, they're working 24 hours a day. And yeah, I understand you have to work 10, 15, 20 years sometimes before you can get day shifts. I think officers need mental health and spiritual care, emotional support. They need time off when they get rattled just like we do. We all have our good days and our bad days. And I think I see some of the departments doing that, but there has to be more pay. I mean, with the economy like it is, that's another thing, a stable economy. I'd hope to see we can address if when I get elected. But we have to take our money. We have the resources. They have to be used wisely and responsibly so that we can take care of all the people that need taken care of and that are also we expect to take care of us.
And this might be my last question for you. We maybe squeeze one more in after this, but Voters from both parties told the Clean Election Survey that they want lawmakers who are willing to work with people across the aisle to find solutions. So, and we've had tightly split legislatures for many years now, so that's kind of a requirement if you want to get anything done. Do you believe this is your job to work across the aisle? And if so, how would you go about accomplishing that?
I've always felt like we need to work together. I say that all the time. You'll see my Facebook and my emails. Have to work together. We have to address it together respectfully and civilly. We can't, the meanness and the nastiness and the disrespect that I see across the aisles and all levels, because I disagree with you, we won't get anywhere. I pledge to do my best to not do that, to reach out. Hey, Farnsworth, I saw him on. I think the other person, when I was running in 2022, I can't remember who I ran against, because I wasn't running against anybody. To me, I was running for something. To do that, if you have the heart of the people in mind, and if you really desire to see a better community, a better state, a better union, you have to work across the aisles. And we have to make sure that we hold people accountable who refuse to work across the aisles. I say 80% are willing to do so.
Sorry about that. That's my dog in the background. But perfect timing. He's just warning us that that is about all the time we have for the questions. But I want to give you an opportunity for a closing statement. Reintroduce yourself to the voters and any other issues we didn't touch on that you wanted to speak on.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. I think the Clean Elections program was really beneficial to me, so I'm thankful to be a part of it. I just want to say to the voters that a vote for me, I would need your vote. I will do my best to work for what I believe is right. I will listen to the constituents. I will try to have an open door. I will be available, and hopefully I have enough staff to do that. That we need to come together, because we're going down, they say downhill. Some people say the hell in a handbasket sometimes, because we're just seeing so much vitriol and hate, and that is not good for anybody. I don't care what your party is. I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your faith is, your color. I don't care. As long as you're a person, we're all human beings sharing this planet, I'm willing to work with anybody that's going to talk to me and work with me respectfully and honestly, and have the goal of coming to a conclusion that's going to be beneficial for all Arizonans.
Thank you. I want to thank our Democratic House candidate, Helen Hunter, for joining us for this Q&A. This concludes our Q&A and our Senate debate that we held earlier. To our candidates, again, thank you so much for participating. To the voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves before the November 5th general election. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. Good night.